All righty, I'm gonna get my screen shared here. Like I said, today we're going to be recapping kind of some of the work we've done with the Tiger Rising, what we've read, and kind of how we've looked at Rob and Sistine. So if you've got your reader's notebook or Post-its, it'd be great to have sitting with you because we are going to go through some things. You are going to have a quiz at the end of this over chapters 7 through 11, just like you did over the first 6 chapters last week. It may be helpful to take some notes or write down some of the things we talk about today so you could use them when you go to take that quiz. No problem with you having your notebook open and looking through it when you answer some of those questions. So our goal today, let's see. Jay, can you read our goal for today, please?
To review how to jot notes and what we have experienced and learned in chapters 7 and 11 of the Tiger Rising.
Thank you. Right, and we've kind of gone over how we need to be taking notes about the important things to make sure we understand what we're reading and make sure that we can look back on it before. Not only should we be doing this with Tiger Rising, and I've been modeling it and I've been doing it, but you guys should also be doing it when you're reading your own book, saying this seems important or this is something I think I probably need to remember and writing it down. Again, you should be continuing, to read your book and move forward with reading your book and taking those notes. If you're not reading your book for 20 minutes every day, you're kind of just sitting at a standstill and not finding anything new to write down. So you need to make sure you're really getting in that 20 minutes of reading every day so you can write down those notes as you continue to read. So last week, we talked about a good way to kind of write down keep track of your notes. So in your notebook, you put the title of the book at the top of the page, or if you draw a line where your notes are done, write the title again at the bottom, and then write the date. If you're taking notes on sticky notes and connecting ideas, that's fine. I would take them and actually stick them in your notebook. If you're on, Epic, because you don't have an actual book. I keep my book. I'm going to find my book here real quick. I keep a lot of my sticky notes like in the pages of my book, but I have an actual physical book here with me, right? If you had a book like this, or if you're reading a book like this, I think it's fine to keep the sticky notes like attached to where you notice things in the book. But if you don't have a book and you're on Epic, it'd be good to stick those sticky notes in your actual notebook to kind of collect them in one place. Really quick, I want to kind of just go through some of the things we said about the characters in chapters 1 through 6. Can a volunteer read what we have this little part in our notes about Rob that happened and what we learned about Rob in chapters 1 through 6? Clay, go ahead. Just the part about Rob, right here.
Okay. Rob, 6th grader, lost his mom, lives in a motel and does not like to go to school. He gets picked on the Dreamongers. Boys, yes. Found a tiger in the woods in the cage. Has a rash and the suitcase.
Right, and we have the suitcase in quotes because it's that kind of emotional suitcase where he keeps all of his feelings locked inside so they don't come out, and he doesn't have to think about them. Let's see. Michael, can you read the part down here about Sistine? I saw your hand go up. And Ania, you can read about the events at the bottom after Michael's done. Go ahead, Michael.
Sistine New Girl. Deep, gravelly voice. Sharp pointed nose and chin. Black eyes, name like the chapel. Plans on moving back to Philadelphia with her dad.
Yeah, and then we added that little Sistine. Does she hate Rob or does she not hate him? We don't really know yet. She kind of acts mean to him, but she started by the end of chapter 6 to kind of come around and be nice to him. So we're not 100% sure. Michael, thanks for reading that. And then Ania, you can read those important events we had down at the bottom.
Events. Rob sees a tiger. Rob gets bullied on the bus. Sistine is the new girl. Ends up getting chased chased and food thrown at her.
Yep. So that was everything. Thank you, Nia. That we read in that first week. We kind of recapped it last week, and that's what we wrote down. And then I have some new stuff. This is where if you would like to, we had a few more events too. We had that Rob attended that funeral for his mom, and his dad slapped him on the back when he was crying, right? And then we also said that he gets sent home from school because of his rash, and he does help save Sistine from the other bullies at school, right? So that we wrote those down too. Sorry, forgot that we had those on the next page. But I wrote down some stuff from chapters 7 through 11, right? And this is one of those things where if you want to take notes right now when we go through them and write some of them in your notebook, that might be a good idea, because then you're going to have that in your notebook when you go to take the quiz. But if you put this in your whole group tab under the Tiger Rising, we're going to go kind of slow. So I would open your notebooks to the whole group tab, and I would write the Tiger Rising at the top, and then the date, August 31st, 2020, chapter 7 through 11. That way, when you go to take this quiz, you have this stuff written down, and you can look at it as a help. I'm noticing that Cynthia's getting her notebook out in her lap and getting ready to write things down. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm noticing that, see, I saw somebody else have their note. Denise looks like she's getting ready to write things down. Kayla looks like she's getting ready to write things down. Jay's got his notebook out, and yeah, I can see has her notebook out. So thank you guys. But write the Tiger Rising, chapter 7 through 11, and I'm going to go kind of slow through this and give you time to write it down. So we're going to start with Rob, right? And a lot more revealing things about Rob, maybe who he really is, came out in those chapters 7 through 11. So I wrote down what I think some of the things, and I know we talked about some of these things in my office hours with the people who got on to listen to the read aloud. We said that Rob begins talking more to Sistine, right? And he starts helping with maintenance at the hotel when he is not in school. So he's staying home from school. He starts talking to Sistine on the bus ride. She says she's going to bring him his homework. And then he agrees with his dad that if he's not at school, he's at least going to help work at the hotel. And so he doesn't like the sunshine. If you guys remember, he talks about how that reminds him of his mom's funeral, which is kind of another hint that he doesn't really like thinking about that part of his life, right? In fact, he'd rather it be cloudy and rainy than sunny, because that sun makes him think about that sadness and that difficult part of his life. He meets Willie Mae in the laundry room. Or really, we meet Willie Mae. He probably already knew Willie Mae, but we meet Willie Mae in the laundry room, and she talks to about how that she thinks his rash is caused by him letting all the sadness build up in his legs, and that he needs to let that sadness rise up out of him. Right? And then he also tells Sistine about the tiger at the very end of chapter 11. He tells her, hey, I know where there's this tiger, or I saw this tiger in the cage. And if you guys remember, he says that Sistine was the perfect person to tell, because she believed him. She didn't say like, no, you didn't, or what do you mean a tiger? She just asked him, where is it? Like, I want to see it. Where is this tiger? And so we start to see Rob trust Sistine a little bit more, and he's building a relationship, a friendship with her. They don't say they're friends yet, but he's at least able to talk to her and kind of spend time with her by the end of chapter 11. Moving down and looking at Sistine, we found out that she wanted Rob's rash so she doesn't have to go to school. So we see that she also hates school, and she takes his homework after school the one day, and she finds out about the tiger. Rob tells her about the tiger. So that's where we are. We don't learn a whole lot else about her in those few chapters, just that she seems to also kind of start to feel more like Rob and act a little bit more like Rob. We do meet and talk about Rob's father a lot, right? So it says that he's the main maintenance man at the hotel. That's motel. That's why Rob's going to help him. And he makes Rob start working. He tells him, if you're not going to school, you can at least start working. And he's a very, very tired person. He's working all day. He's by himself, so he's trying to take care of Rob and make money for them and make sure they have a place to live. And he says repeatedly, like, we're only going to be in this hotel for a little while, right? Once we've got our lives together and we've got some money, we're going to buy a house and we'll move out of the motel. It says, I think it was funny, but it was worth noting just because they made a big point of it, that he has big feet and really crooked toes, and that he cooks meals for Rob, and he's not a very good cook. He makes macaroni and cheese, and Rob said he always makes it too dry and it's kind of sticky with that powdery taste to it. So that was the 3 characters. I'm going to give you about 1 more minute to continue if I see, because I see several people are still writing. So I'm going to give you about 1 more minute to finish writing up what you're working on writing down, and then we're going to come back and move on to the next page and talk more about some of the events that happened in those chapters. So give you about 1 minute to finish writing stuff down, and then we're going to move on. All right, we're going to move on. Talk about some of the important events that happened. Who can remember what we think? I'm going to give some people some time to share what you think might be some of the important events that happened in chapter 7 through 11. Anybody remember some of those things that we read last week that might have seemed important in the book? It's been a while, so you might not remember. We've had the whole weekend, so we may just go through them. Nobody has their hand up. Michael, go ahead.
That last week we read when Sistine wants Rob to do something for her, or I remember that Sistine wanted Rob to do something for.
We did. You're right. We read that she wanted to get his rash so she didn't have to go to school. That was one of the main things that we talked about for a little bit last week. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I don't see anybody else's hand, so we'll just kind of refresh our memories here because I know it's been the whole weekend. So the first thing is that Sistine sits by Rob. It's the exact thing that Michael just talked about, right? Bus. Excuse me. And she rubs his leg because she wants to get his rash, right? So Rob says no one can get it because it's not a disease. It's just him. It's something he's dealing with. It's not something you can catch. It's not contagious. So that was the first thing that was really kind of a big event, was that it kind of, because it showed that Sistine and Rob are a little bit more comfortable with each other than they used to be in the story. The next one is that Norton and Billy bother Rob on the bus again, but this time he just kind of ignores him. There's no, he talks to Sistine the whole time, and they kind of let him alone because he's not showing it affects him at all. The next thing is Rob gives his dad the note from the principal that says he's got to stay home, and his dad decides to let him stay home, but he tells him he's got to help with maintenance. He can't just sit around. He's got to work and do things at the hotel, right? And it was kind of important because Rob's dad knows that he's not contagious, that there's nothing that the kids are going to get at school, and he just lets him stay home for a few days anyway, right? He says, we'll schedule an appointment with the doctor, and I'll have the doctor call him, but I'll let you stay home for a few days, because Rob's dad can kind of tell that he's miserable at school, and he thinks it may be better for him to stay home for just a few days before he goes back. So that happens. We also read that Rob whittled some of the wood, and it turned out to be Sistine. Remember, he said he was going to whittle it into a tiger, and then it was like sometimes it just lets his hands do the work, and without thinking, it turned out that he whittled Sistine into the wood. And then at that night, he dreamed about like Sistine riding on the back of the tiger. So he's now put like both Sistine and the tiger kind of into his thoughts that of things he's thinking about. He meets Willie Mae at the laundry room, and she gives him that advice of let the sadness rise on up, right? And if you should feel sad, you should share your feelings when you're sad. It's important to do that, because if you keep it all down inside, then you're always going to be sad. But if you're able to kind of share it with people, or at least acknowledge that you feel sad and let yourself feel sad every once in a while, it'll help you get through it and then feel better later. And then the last thing is that Rob tells Sistine where there's a tiger, and she says nothing, but she just asks him where, right? You don't need to write down all of that in every single word. It's 9:01. Again, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to go ahead and write down some notes, and then we're going to keep going. So you got 2 minutes. About 1 more minute. 1 more minute. I'm going to see. Okay, we're going to come back together here, move on a little bit. So the point of this is that every so often, y'all, when you read, you need to stop and think and kind of recap and review what you just read and combine all your notes and try to figure out what's the most important thing. So like if I go back to some of these events that we just wrote down, things that happened in those last chapters, what do we think are kind of the most important events that happened in those chapters 7 through 11? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things written down. If we were to say, okay, what was the most important? Yes, Jonathan, you can go ahead and go. What do we think were some of the most important things that we read, most important events? Raise your hand if you can share. And if no one's raising hands, I'm going to start just calling on y'all willy-nilly. Corbin, go ahead. What do you think was one of the more important events that we read last week?
That Sistine, that Rob told Sistine about the tiger, and
Go ahead. Sorry, keep going.
and she said nothing. She just said, Where's the tiger?
Yeah, absolutely. That is probably the most important event that happened last week, because it's showing that they're going to go further with this. Now that Sistine knows where this tiger is, based on what we know with Sistine and what we've heard about her and seen her doing the story, he's going to know more about this tiger, and that they're going to have to be around each other more. So we absolutely know now that was an important event. Anybody else want to add to anything else that they think was one of the more important events in that last chapter, or those last 2 chapters? I don't see any hand. Michael, go ahead.
When the first day that Sistine came to their school, and at the lunchroom, she gets bullied and she walks outside, and Rob tells the bullies to stop.
So that was 100%, Michael, one of the really important events we have seen happen in the story. That was in the earlier chapters, right? 1 through 6. But that was the first case where we saw Rob kind of act differently. So that was an important event. I would probably say the part where he talks to Willie Mae and she tells him that he needs to let the sadness rise up. Even though it doesn't seem important now, might be a big deal later, right? If Rob begins to understand what she means and starts doing that, it might change the way he feels and acts a little bit. But we should stop and think about what was just the most important thing I read in those last few chapters to keep track of our own reading. So your job today is you're going to take the quick quiz on Canvas about the Tiger Rising, okay? And you're going to go on, take that quiz. You can use the notes you wrote down. Some of the notes from the book are also posted on the quiz. You can use those too. All right, so this score should be higher than our scores last week because you should have taken the time to write some of those notes down and you can use them. Then you're going to read for 20 minutes and then you're going to complete 2 Lexia units if you have time. I would love to look on Epic later today and see that everyone in here read for at least like 15 or 20 minutes. The goal is 20. I know sometimes a small group that number can change, right? But I would love to be able to get on and see that. What we're going to do today in small group, if you are in my group or Miss Weibel's group, is we're going to actually create breakout rooms in our Zooms, and we're going to pop in and we're going to listen to you read individually every once in a while, and then pop back into the main Zoom to check on things. But we're going to go into those Zooms and we're going to be reading a little bit out loud to your teacher and talking about what you read. So please, when you come and meet with us today, like if you're about to meet with me in small group, I'm going to end the meeting really fast and start it again. But before you come back on and meet with me, please, please, please try to have Epic already open when we meet up, okay? Try to already be on Epic so your book is already pulled up and ready to go. Same thing if you're in Miss Weibel's group. Miss Weibel would like to chat with Biani and Alexander really quickly before we get moving on. If you are not